It is life just devouring life. Gets so in love with itself. It's one big organism, and it just continually consumes part of itself to create more life. Nature is like creativity right before your eyes. And so I no longer saw it as good and evil or life and death. It all just became very natural. It's all life flowing into life.
You're listening to Find the Good News, episode 95, The Jewel in the Ashes, a Beacon Series conversation featuring Robin Easton, author of Naked in Eden, My Adventure and Awakening in the Australian Rainforest. Find the Good News is produced by Parker Brand Creative Services, a branding agency that thinks sideways, pushes forward, and gets your brand up. See what else we do at parkerbrandup.com. Finding the right words to introduce my guest for this episode isn't difficult. In fact, as I sat and meditated on our conversation, waiting for sweet, descriptive honey to drip from my mind to my lips, the most simple words I've ever used to frame any guest of Find the Good News came to mind. Robin Easton, my dear human sister that you are about to meet, is the human embodiment of a radiant, glowing, sacred heart. Every single conversation I've had on Find the Good News has blessed me in some way. I've gained new perspectives, found clarity in my existing paradigms, and watched as clunky ideas and forms of reasoning were turned to ash, fertile soil for fresh spiritual fruits. In this very intimate conversation with Robin Easton, author of Naked in Eden, My Adventure and Awakening in the Australian Rainforest, I listened anew as we traveled each of these cycles for several revolutions. Through this show, I have made many new and diverse relationships all across the world, meeting people living lives of goodness that I'd never dreamed of connecting with. In traversing these intermingled online circles, I met Robin, and it was clear from the jump that she was a generous communicator with a willingness to pour out love and prose like a living fountain. Nature seemed to create a common bond between us, and it was through this thread that I learned about her book, Naked in Eden, a very personal memoir of her spiritual awakening in the Australian rainforest. I purchased the book and was mesmerized by the rich detail and palpable way she shared the entire experience. This book, and Robin's special gift of revealing her naked spiritual heart, drew me in alongside her as she experiences an integration with the natural world that so few of us shackled to our cities could ever experience. When Robin agreed to visit with me on Find the Good News, I was thrilled. Once technology made it possible for us to connect, her good heart shimmered like a multifaceted jewel. I believe Robin is walking the path of the Bodhisattva, a giver, a true lamp for those desiring light. It is my great hope that you will feel what I felt in speaking with her, that you will hear the elemental outpouring of love in her voice, a love that comes from a human heart that is ready to embrace the entire world. Now, it's time to loosen your grip on what you think you know, clear your mind of preconceived notions, open your heart as far as you are able, then tune your attention to this good news beacon and press play on a little good news.
Wake up, it's morning, you're dreaming up a story. I can hear the way it's going, 'cause you're laughing in your sleep. On the path to your deliverance and a holy wall of light pouring through your window.
Old news, bad news, fake news. Sometimes you want to shut those signals down and seek a better source. With my Find the Good News Beacon series, I tune into good people doing good works wherever I can find them. I scan across the full spectrum of life, seeking out human beings that have turned their dials towards helping others, aligning their time, resources, and talents with goodness, justice, mercy, and love. In each episode, I sync up with the hearts and minds of my extraordinary guests. We have dynamic conversations that invigorate the mind long after our transmission has ended. I discover the critical life experiences that shape them, the perspectives that drive them, and the fundamental beliefs that have anchored them to a path of goodness. There's a lot of background noise in the world. My name is Orrin Parker, and I'm cutting through the static to find the good.
I love you just as well.
guy is so unique. I mean, he is onto something no one else is doing. And I don't mean just the good news part. There, like you say in the interview, there are other people out there kind of looking and sharing good news. But you have a very organic approach that is like when you were talking about tears and allowing more time and there is a lot of pressure can be online in any, I suppose, profession. Well, have to keep it so many minutes and do your intro.
Right.
There's a format, follow the format and you'll be, and it's like, for me, excuse my French, but it's like hell's bells. I've ditched the format long ago.
Exactly. God, I agree with that 100%. I mean, people want a structure, I guess, with a show. I mean, if you call it a show, people want a structure so they can identify it. But to some degree, I mean, if you're setting up these boundaries, folks are just going to clam up and they're not going to get into that territory that we all need to get into, really dig around.
Do you know, you are so right. I thought, in fact, you saying that reminded me of one of the feelings and thoughts I had, which was, Oren, you are offering, not providing, but it's deeper. You're offering a living experience that if people want to step into it and actually experience life right there with you, they get to do that.
Wow.
That is so huge. I mean, I've done a lot of interviews, and I always am grateful and appreciate it and learn something and share, but I've never seen anyone offering what you're offering. And
wow.
I thought, I gotta go in and I gotta give the reaction to Oren that, excuse me for saying it this way, but that he should have had then. When he did the interview. It's not to, put anyone else down, but it's just like, my God, this is brilliant.
Are you living in the United States right now, or are you in another?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, I'm in the U.S., in New Mexico.
Oh, okay, New Mexico. Okay.
Yeah, I'm about a half hour north of Santa Fe, where I lived for about, almost 25 years in Santa Fe.
Okay. I love listening to Father Richard Rohr's podcast, and he's out of New Mexico. Now, I'm not exactly sure where, but I believe that's the Center for Active Action and Contemplation, or Contemplative Action. I can't exactly remember right off the top of my head.
Yeah, his name sounds familiar. But
yeah, he's definitely pushing into some of that territory that I like to get into, just trying to tear down some of the walls without forgetting the history of things, but, tearing down some of the barriers that between people and what they believe and what's keeping them apart from a real intimacy with the divine,
Absolutely. With each other, with the divine. I think now more than ever, that is, for me, it's just critical. It's crucial. It's almost like, why anything if I don't do that?
I tell you, this is this is probably going to be an interesting conversation, because I started reading your book and I didn't finish it yet. And the part, because I've been, unfortunately, we've been in the middle of a move. And so I've been kind of like segmenting my days and moving equipment and setting things up and reading and doing my own reflections in the mornings. So I'm not through with the book, but I tell you, there got to a certain stage in it where I was going, man, I'm really resonating with this. And I wonder, it's got me thinking, especially this morning, the part that I was on. And I'd love to start our conversation with this, actually, because I highlighted this and I was like, God, this is so interesting. Because most people that I interview, I say, so tell me about yourself, give me the quick download of who you are. It's so hard to do. But I ask people to do that so my listeners know who I'm talking to.
But this one line that you had, I thought, wow, what a great way to frame our conversation right from the beginning. And you said in your book, you said, someday someone will ask me, what do you do for a living? And I will say, I feel.
Oh, yes. I am so thrilled you picked that one. In my entire book, that just came out of me. And I didn't even know it was in there till way later. Editing is like, whoa, I actually put that in. That's me. That's me. In a nutshell.
Yeah.
And that you picked that line does not surprise me.
Well, you know why I picked it? Because honestly, I love this book so far. I can't, it's an adventure for one, but I mean, there's so much in there to learn from. And what I find is the camaraderie. There's certain, things that you say that it may not be like exactly my own experience, but I can relate to the way you're retelling it and go, oh, I understand this feeling. I understand what she's talking about here. And when that particular line jumped out of me, and it's kind of where I paused, I said, I want to stop here because this leaves some mystery for our conversation. But also, I get this because I think this thought all the time because I'm in advertising. I have a creative studio and it's
right. I saw that.
Well, people tend to look at advertising and think, oh, it's sort of like a misinformation engine. It's a way to convince people to like something that maybe isn't good or a way to package something that maybe isn't great. It's all a sales pitch. I've never taken that approach in advertising. And so there are times when I go, well, how do you juxtapose? How does it look when you juxtapose this maybe this industry that's perceived as disingenuous with who I am? And when I set those things next to each other, I go, well, they don't belong together. How can I make them belong together? How can I make them work together? But when I read this sentence, what do you do for a living? I will say, I feel. I went, oh, I get this. This is exactly what I'm talking about. It's like sort of the whole purpose of this show is to go, yeah, just because you work in an industry doesn't mean you have to stop feeling. You can still inject your being into that,
Yes, absolutely. And it's funny, a while back, my book was published by a fairly large publisher, but it didn't align with who I am.
Mm-hmm.
And the whole kind of push to market and do this, and it was like, and I'm no longer with them. I've left, and I'm under my own, production company now. And it is so liberating, Oren. It's like I started that very question. I'm an author and I do lots of other things. I'm an inspirational speaker and I'm a performer of music. I used to be a concert pianist and I've been all kinds of things, but I realized, this is not working. It's actually hurting my body. Where Robin is back there somewhere, way back there. What happened? I'm losing Robin.
Yeah.
The feeling. Where's the feeling? And then I just finally one day decided I'm going to step out on a limb. I'm going to open up more with people. I'm going to show them who I am. I'm going to be who I am. And my way was always to reach out and love people. I love doing that. It's just I can't seem to stop myself.
Right. Right.
It's like, there's a really loving, cool person. Oh, look at them. Aren't they sweet? And, and I have to go and say, oh, I saw you. You are so dear. And I saw when you did that. And I have to say something. But the thing is, I realized every time I would go to post on Facebook or do a blog post or, I was diving deeper and deeper into kind of like taking more and more risk into who I really am.
Yeah.
More exposure. And it was like everything just took off. It was like, and it still is, it's almost faster, more than I can handle.
Wow, really?
It's, wow. Yes, people. And I kept more and more finding my niche, all these people kind of coming out of the woodwork. And it's like, oh, my word, I feel like that. I said that, thank you. I feel like I can finally express that. I can feel that. I can honor that.
Yeah.
No, it's like, for me, I was seeing, I mean, like, there's other people, they want to take risks, they want to feel, they want to be real and connect in a genuine way, a more real, I suppose, authentic or, way than what we've been conditioned,
Yeah. I relate to that. I do. I totally relate to that. That's sort of, it's been a long time coming, but it's the same thing. I can see that same process with me where even like in your book, you talk about being like that even when you were a child. And I was like, yeah, I remember being this way and almost a sense of like, not anxiety, but like frustration. Like one of my friends and I talked about this years ago. I said, there was almost this sense that, this is going to sound so strange, but to maybe some people, but like I wasn't from this place, if that makes any sense.
Exactly. I knew you were going to say that.
Yeah.
I know. And you look out around you and just like, how am I going? Well, this is me. How am I going to reconcile? How do I?
Yeah, reconcile. That's the word. Yeah. I say that all the time. How do I reconcile these two things? It's like it's like there's one foot in one reality and one in another. And on one hand I go, okay, so that's what we're faced with, right? I mean, that's what you face. You got one foot in one reality and one in the other. So why, right? I mean, that's the next thing I have to ask myself is why then? If that is what the way it is, what's the reason for that? It can't surely be to just be filled with some sort of discontent. There's got to be a reason that you have a longing or a feeling like that. It's got to be some value somehow to fellow mankind.
And what was the last bit? A longing to, what was it?
Well, it's like a longing to like sort of share that with other people. You want to go, hey, this feeling isn't just a feeling that's sort of creating discontent. It's actually something that has value for other beings, in the world.
Yes. And I think it is also possibly like yours or mine. I mean, you'd have to say for yourself, but for me, it's like a vehicle to carry me more fully to myself and to more real full connections, vulnerable, beautiful, intimate, whole, like connections with another soul, another human being. And through that, it's like we say, oh, there you are. There I am.
Mm.
And in that, it's like we feel the divine or God. I am whole. Oh, my word. There, you are like me. And there's a strength that forms.
Yeah.
In that.
It's so interesting. I've been thinking, I don't know why I've been thinking about this a lot lately, but when I was a kid, well, let me back up. And maybe you've been through this as well. I'd be real curious to hear, but you look back on your childhood and you start to think, well, maybe what influenced me? What were the things I was consuming or what was I doing that perhaps has painted my reality, the way or the lens through which I look at the world or life or structure things, my own personal cosmology, I guess. And so I was thinking about this the other day, and I remember as a kid, I used to read these comic books called ElfQuest. And I was thinking about them the other day because they were real nature-based things, this whole storyline. It was all nature-based, and each of these elves had like a different gift, in a way of, like each one had like a different magic that interacted with the natural world. And the one thing, though, that I thought, and it kind of keys in on what you were saying, you were just saying, oh, I recognize you, I see you, you're like me. each of these elves had what they called a soul name. And when they met another person or another elf, they called it recognition. And so they would hear the name of this the other person. It was a secret to each one of them, but they would hear that other one's name when they would meet them. And it was like a spiritual recognition moment. It was like a bond would form. So I was thinking about all that the other day, and I was like, man, if I'm really being honest with myself upon reflection all these years later, I can still see that comic book imprinted like almost like a little light web over the way I perceive really just almost like reality. I mean, and maybe to some people that's silly, but I mean, it really is true. I mean, listening to you say that, I was like, oh, there again, you're describing recognition. It's like, I see you.
Yes. And even in those, even through a comic book like that with those, I mean, you describe them, it's magical even just listening to it. That your magic that was in you is like reflected. That was something, it sounds like, where the magic got to be reflected back to you.
Yes. Gosh, that's exactly what I was thinking. I thought, is it the comic book imprinting upon me? Or did I recognize, or did the writers, when they were writing that, were they trying to use that medium to express a reality that is, and I recognize that reality? And I think that's kind of like your book. As I'm reading your book, I'm having that recognition moment. I'm going, yes, I see what is I'm understanding what's being put out here. It's resonating. It's connecting. It's authentic. It's real. It's tangible. Even from the very beginning in your book, I mean, your experience with the snake, I just was like, gosh, the way she's describing this, it's like you're communing with that creature. You're in a dialogue with it. It's so incredible.
Yeah, it was incredible. Oh, my word. And you know, coming from Maine where nothing was poisonous. I mean, there were winters and, you know, there was a bit of poison ivy, but we knew how to recognize that from like 3 years, you know, old on. But then going into this land that has some of the world's, in fact, a lot of the world's potentially most deadly snakes, you know, to humans, and deadly to humans. And it's like you can't help. And I didn't have a fear of snakes because we grew up on a lake and we handled the water snakes. And, you know, my life was pretty nature-based, especially in the summers, you know, when there wasn't school. But all of a sudden you're in a rainforest that you know these beings are there, and along with many others. But the snakes they were huge teachers for me. I have other stories in there further on. The book kind of gets more, it goes deeper as it goes on, but they were, you know, you just, because they were, some of them, so deadly to humans, if you didn't know how to be around them, what their needs were, their habitat, you know, things like that, you just blundered along, you could potentially get bitten, and their venom is so deadly. And so you know you're out there, especially early on, that is inevitable. You're in the jungle, you're in the rainforest there. You're going to, at some point, come face to face with one of those. And you kind of, in your mind at first, in the young years, you know, you push it back, you know, like, oh, no, okay, I'm just here, it's all cool. And, you know, and you focus on the things that won't harm you.
Right.
But then you're always wondering, well, how would I respond? And you think, God, I'll freak, I won't handle it. And then the day comes, and there it is, right in your face. And the most amazing thing happened for me at the beginning of the book there, where, yes, I was afraid. I mean, I'm peeing, and my pants are down around my ankles.
Right.
And I mean, it doesn't get much more vulnerable than that.
Right. The position you were in was completely vulnerable.
I know. I mean, it was like everything that could possibly be testing me was testing me. And But then to discover in myself this hidden, buried, unknown to me, sort of in my conscious awareness at that point in my life, this incredibly primal knowing and instinct to how to behave, what to do, and to even hear the snake's thoughts. And snakes, of all the animals I've communicated with, they are almost the fastest, clearest, instantaneous, kind of like thought to thought or knowing to knowing. Of all the species that I've communicated, they're amazing.
Really?
And I don't. Oh yeah, and I don't know if it's because they're really their only defense is their speed to get away or to bite. They don't have, claws. They don't have many of the other, defense mechanisms that other species have.
Right.
So maybe they've had to learn to assess quickly, more quickly in some ways.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But it's kind of a thought that I've had about that with snakes. But I keep going back to when you were talking about as a kid and the elf comic books and that, and something, you said a question, I don't remember how you worded it, but I think the gist of it was kind of looking at what things imprinted or conditioned us when we were young, kind of like going back and looking, and then maybe discerning, ooh, I don't want that one anymore. Ooh, this one, I'm going to claim that.
Yeah.
So in my second book, I have a line somewhere that says, I went back and in the ashes of my life, I blew the ashes away and I took with me the jewels, the diamonds, because diamonds don't burn,
Yeah.
And so those I carried with me, the things that were really like my dad giving me nature,
Right.
But I was thinking how, this conditioning and how deep it can be so pervasive that as we get older and everything around us, year after year, month after month, on it goes, is so pervasive and can be so accepted, things that are actually really horrific or just devoid of any life, just in the absence of life. And I just thought I'll fill in here a minute to tell something about this. But first, I should tell the rainforest, the Daintree rainforest, which is where this book, Naked in Eden, takes place. Depending on which scientist you talk, to, it's like 100 to 180 million years old. And that's like tens of millions of years older than the Amazon.
Mm.
And just in this Daintree area, there are, I think it's like 12 or 13 of the world's, out of the world's like oldest, primitive flowering plants. Like there's 19 families of primitive flowering plants. This area has 12 of them.
Wow.
Are in this area. And the plants there are so old, they're still the same plants that the dinosaurs ate. So you take a girl from Maine who is really lost. The only time she wasn't lost was when she was in nature, and her dad gave her that. But so much of my life, as the older I got, was around school. You had to go to school back then by law. And so I my time with nature got less and less and less and less.
Mm-hmm.
And it would start getting conditioned out of me.
Oh, yeah.
And so you take this young girl at age 25, and I'm plunked down, way off the map in this virgin rainforest that's over 100 million years old and so far away from people and everything I've ever known, so far away from social conditioning. And I'm in this ancient dinosaur plant area with these trees and ferns and water you could drink that all runs right down to white sand beaches in the sea. And then just off the coast a ways is the Great Barrier Reef, the Coral Sea and the Great Barrier Reef. And to just go wild like that, I mean, there are very few now, really, opportunities for a person to kind of experience a more indigenous way of life, our indigenous roots, those early primordial feelings and way of life. And so I'm way out there with 100 million years old life, basically undisturbed. And talk about something happens, Oren, where the contrast between that, this millions of years of primal knowing, still there, intact. And then I'm looking out from that back at my culture, and it's like, holy mackerel, what happened here? And then, like, just automatically something happens just being there for any length of time, more than just a quick vacation and bam, you're gone. But actually being there where you start to shed your clothes and you're walking barefoot and you learn and observe about the snakes. And are they terrestrial on the land? Are they arboreal? Are they nocturnal, night, come out at night? Are they diurnal, come out in the day? You know, do they during the heat of the day, you can't just step over a rock. They could be in the shade of the rock or the log, and you start learning. They're very territorial. Okay, this is a little yellow-bellied black snake. It goes here by the spring every day, and this one here. And so you slowly are shedding, leaving something behind you, this conditioning. And you're slowly kind of infiltrating your spirit into this forest, this wildness that you start to realize is so intelligent. It is intelligence itself. And when you start to see all these little life and death, and I call it kind of communion because it's really is life flowing into life, but all these things all day long eating something else. And you have to somehow in yourself reconcile this, because I've been conditioned, there's life and then there's death. You know, life is good, but death is bad. And these creatures that go and grab something and eat it, and there's blood and guts, and they're evil, they're bad. The snakes, they're evil, you know, swallowing the little bird. Well, then you see the bird, the beautiful little bird, going and snatching up a beautiful butterfly, you know, that has wings almost as big as my hand.
Wow.
And so everything goes a kilter. It's like, wow, so the bird isn't innocent either. Well, maybe they're all innocent. Maybe it is life just devouring life. You know, like it's so in love with itself. It's one big organism, and it just continually devours, you know, consumes part of itself, life, to create more life. A continual creation. You know, so nature is like creativity or creation, like right before your eyes. And so I no longer saw it as death, like good and evil or life and death. It all just became very natural. And, oh, there's a little snake. He's having, you know, his breakfast, you know, the bird, and the bird is having the butterfly, and it's all flowing, you know, life flowing into life.
Yeah.
It's So your whole conditioning that I got from school and really young, my dad finally took us out of the church, but when I was probably maybe 3 or 4, but, that people can get from their church or schooling or their culture, the conditioning starts just being obliterated.
Yeah, I can see that. I mean, as and then time as well, I imagine, right? I mean, time becomes more elastic, right?
Talking with you is so amazing because you just see absolutely until for me, and this is so hard to convey for someone, and I have almost no concept of time. Like I probably had to go and check. Okay, I have an interview with her now. Let's see. You said, okay, 2 o'clock.
Yeah.
Okay, I got to go look up the time zone now, and I got to keep looking at my clock. Time. Oh yeah, I got to grasp this. Time.
Yeah.
I went years without clocks, years without calendars, no TV, no computers, nothing.
Yeah.
And you're right. Your whole where there is no time, like where you start to feel things where the past, the present, the potential, what we might call the future, it's all just happening at once.
Right. That's a hard conversation to have with many people I have found. I mean, I have found people like you in my life, and I've been blessed, honestly, even through this show, to have had many conversations where this concept or this way of perceiving time, which is really ultimately what it boils down to, is perception. And I've been lucky to have conversations where we can talk about it. Then there we go. It just something happened. I could hear you though, but I said, "Well, let me try to call her back." We're plagued by technical difficulties today. It's a really odd phenomena.
Maybe our connection, like seeing each other and just thriving in that, maybe it's creating a lot of energy.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on, man. It's really wild. That's really strange. You know what though? I my suspicion sometimes is that you're not far off. I think with what you're saying, I think I have a sneaky suspicion sometimes that there is forces at play, that you just can't really put your finger on, that sometimes try to get people to either connect or not connect. You know what I mean?
Yes, exactly. And it's meant to be or not.
Right, right. Well, that was, we were talking about time though. And yeah, I was right on board with what you were saying there. I mean, about not being around a clock, because that's a difficult thing. I mean, we live out here in this society that we've structured that we don't question for some reason. And we just roll along with it. And we're like, everything is on a clock. I mean, everything runs on time. And on one hand, I guess the argument from, the religion of time is that, well, how would you do anything? How would we get anything done? And, deep down, my rebuttal to that is, what do we really need to do? I mean, I listen as I'm reading your book and other people who have sort of stepped out of the wheel of time as much as a human being can. Yeah. We don't need very much, really. We think we do. We believe we need a lot of things, but we don't really need a lot.
Yeah, I agree. It's amazing what we can let go of. Something I've been doing lately when I continually check in, 2 things I'll ask myself. Where have I fallen asleep at the wheel? Where in my life have I fallen asleep? Almost daily. And then the other one is, have like sometimes a rigorous schedule, other days so, but I'll look at it and think, I might be getting, this is too much. I'm overwhelmed. I'll think, wait a minute. What really do I need here? And, what is really essential? It's amazing the things I can cut out.
Yeah.
And say, well, let's start. I'll do that later next week. I'll do this, or just even the things that you can live without.
Yeah.
I mean, I've lived with just what would fit in a knapsack for years.
Yeah.
Do you know, I'm not, sorry, go ahead.
No. I'm following you. I was really just affirming that. I get what you mean. Yeah.
Do you know, another thing, you were talking about time, and I was remembering, like in the rainforest, when I started, I mean, it just happened, and I was right, ready, needing something in my life. But it's more than that. It's such an ancient, primal place. I mean, millions of years old, hundreds of millions, or 100 million years old. And it's like something happens real organic, almost effortlessly. And as long as we don't resist it, we unfold. It's like perfect birthing place is right there, and it is so amazing. So when I first started to lose my grip on time, I remember for a little bit it was like I felt disoriented and confused and like, wow, this is weird. And then I remember thinking one day, well, who had clocks, I mean, clocks don't go back to early when the Aboriginals were here. The only markers were like the sun rising, the sun setting, the slight shift in the seasons of certain plants that produce food, or the slight blossoming of leaves on some of the trees made them look pink and beautifully colored, the new leaves, and certain flowering plants. I mean, I think it was about just a few degrees south of the equator, so there's, it's basically 12 hours light, 12 hours dark, and and so you get into a more, I know I used the word earlier, but kind of an organic rhythms, or you start attuning with the earth, and with time it becomes so natural. I remember when I first came out of the rainforest, and I owned a cabin way up north in Maine. I mean, I had to adjust, it was way out in the boonies, but up near Mount Katahdin, state park up that way. But I remember when the electricity was turned on in the house, I was like someone, I remember, I hardly knew the woman, but I'd met her in town, and she came out, and I'm standing there at the kitchen sink, turning the tap off and on. She said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Look at this. Look, water, no water, water, just right out of the tap." And then the light, turning the light switches on, and then having gone years without lights, no lights, and just to bed with the sun, awake with the sun, and turning on a light after dark, and feeling myself getting all agitated, and it was too much. I had to turn it off. And then it's the middle of winter in Maine, and I mean, with the wind chill, you can get minus 70 degrees, minus 50, even without a wind chill sometimes up there. And I couldn't sleep with the windows closed in the middle of winter, so I'd have on, for years, I couldn't even sleep on a bed. I'd sleep on the floor, and there was a window above my head, and I'd had on this wool cap, and I was I think I had a sleeping bag thrown over me, and all the windows were open, and I'd wake up and there was snow and sometimes I'd get so, like the walls were just closing, and I'd grab my sleeping bag and I'd trudge out under a spruce tree, and I'd dig into the snow, and I'd just go in there. It's like, okay.
Yeah, I can relate to this. I've never been through an experience like what you've been through, and I've always been fascinated with different people who've made these types of journeys. And I know this is maybe a weird line to draw, but between two people, and I'm sure you're familiar with this person, but I'm sure you're familiar with the story of Chris McCandless and the book Into the Wild.
Wild, Yeah.
You know, when I read that book I was in my early 20s, there was a part of that story. I remember a friend who gave me the book. He said, he had a little note in the front. It said something to this effect. He said, "You're going to read this as I did, I'm sure, because Chris made a journey that you and I will never get to make. He sort of became like the sacrifice for those of us who
Yeah.
never got to walk into
Yeah.
the wild." And so I all these years later, I've thought about that as much about the book as I did about the inscription my friend left. Because, you know, my wife and I were talking about this a few weeks ago. I said, you know, can you imagine had Chris come home, you know, because he wanted to come home. You know, he was leaving. He got trapped, you know, and if he had come back, what would he have been able to share with us about this experience of being isolated and being tied to the cycles of nature and you know, the sun and the moon and the wildlife and everything that he had experienced. And as I was reading your book and thinking about this conversation today, I thought, well, in some way, that is kind of what I'm getting to experience today, is to talk to someone who, like Chris, also got left and went into the wild, but you came out. And now you've carried out whatever you've got there, and you get to share that with us. And that's a wonderful gift.
Oh, wow, Warren, your depth of vision. I mean, you have got to know you are a visionary. I mean, in the truest sense of the word, it's wow. Yes, and you know, there is not a day of my life, Warren, that I don't know that I was given a gift, and that I do not give thanks, and I don't know why, well, I was dying, basically.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have lived had I not had that. And, you know, there are some people that say, oh, well, Chris, you know, in the Into the Wild book, well, you know, that was silly. I mean, he died no. I read that and I cried.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, anyone can have a mishap. Anyone can. I could have. I still could. People have mishaps in this culture every day.
Right.
But he died. He was so much courage to he was trying to find something beyond.
Right.
You know, in some way set himself free.
Mm-hmm.
Or at least question, you know, to go out on that limb and see, is there another view? And I am not saying that, you know, that just going into the wilds. I lived in Alaska for a short time, like the Alaskan wilds, or into the jungles or rainforest of Australia, or the Amazon, or wherever. That is the only way. I mean, I really do feel there are many doors to really almost to freedom, you know, in ourselves. Like almost daily we can be presented with doors. And
Yeah.
for me, oh, wow, you know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, you know, it's hard to stay in that state where you see those doors whenever you're trapped in time. It's interesting. I didn't expect our conversation to be about that, but, you know, getting into that space that you got into, I guess it unlocks almost like a second sight. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. That is beautiful. It absolutely does. And I know some people do drugs or different things to try to have those experiences that break them out of the conditioning or the numbness or the deadness or the whatever. But you know, something I've learned in my life since I've been out, it's kind of what I did. That was like a big leap. And then there were many other leaps. And in my second book, there's more adventures and things, and I still have adventures. I get up every morning and I hike barefoot 2 to 4 miles out into the desert. And I do, one of the ways that for me that I found to expedite or to really open the doors number one, do the things that we're afraid of. And I don't mean, fear can be a healthy thing. Like it can be a guide. Fear is hardwired into our primal brain to, you don't want to go just traipsing off into a jungle. You could die. I mean, a kid went in there and he had his throat slit by a cassowary. They have a 5-inch rapier sharp claw.
Oh, wow. God, it's crazy.
Yeah. And so, I kept staying within I kept testing the waters, but I had common sense. I used my common sense, but then kept testing a little bit, keep each time. And we can apply that in our lives now, like simple things that we can do each day to, shake up our routine or face a fear. Like if we have a fear, like I heard about you, taking your show on the road there for a bit, and kind of that was a new experience for you. And I thought, good for you, Oren. Because to kind of step out of the comfort zone, like you said, where you were kind of in your own kind of domain and where things are familiar and it's kind of, you can control it. And then going out on the road where you don't know what'll be what, it's kind of a new adventure. And so those type of things, like facing our fears, like what is it? What could I do to kind of approach this fear?
Right.
Like public speaking. It could be doing an interview for someone. It could be taking up a dance. It could be any number of things. Some people want to be an artist and they're terrified to. They're afraid they'll fail. They won't be any good, or learning to play an instrument, or whatever it is. So facing my fear is something I'm continually face my fear. And the other thing is kind of just doing things we've never done before. Just thinking, what could I do that I have, and it might be for some people simply eating food that, I don't eat that, or no,
right.
I don't wear that, or no, that's not me. And, and doing it anyway, kind of shaking things up a bit.
That's really what almost causes an awakening in my experience. I might be wrong about this, and I know we all are so different and so varied, but it just seems to be a common thread is the shaking up. It's like that's the part that where the ground stops feeling so certain. For me, that was what it was like, and I wouldn't want to speak from an arrogant place because sometimes that can be perceived that way, and I know I tend to almost be repulsed by that, or repelled, maybe not repulsed, by, I guess, ego or arrogance that surrounds an awakening experience. Because it can come off that way. It can seem like someone maybe setting themselves up to be special or raised above others. Yeah. I'm not a big fan of that kind of thing. No. But at least in my humble experience, it was like you just said, like things getting shaken up, like the components, you put your foot on the ground and things didn't feel certain anymore. And if I would have just stepped back, that's the way in my reflection on it was, if I would have stepped away from that uncertain place where I stuck my foot, then I wouldn't have ever stepped through, because if I would have held back, it wouldn't have broke up the ice, so to speak. I mean, so by stepping forward on that uncertain ground and then the ground just giving out underneath me, I fell in. Do you know what I mean? I mean, I just fell in because I didn't have a choice.
And then what's so delicious is when you fall through, like the ice or the ground gives way, and you can't easily get out.
Oh, right.
So you're stuck there and you have to grow, Right. It's like, and you might spend a whole lot of time, bemoaning your fate and pity partying or whatever. Oh, I have some of that in my second book. It's great. It's delicious. And then finally you realize, okay, no one kind of like, for me, no one else can help me out of it. They're all trying to get out of their own pits.
Yeah, that's so interesting because that's literally, that was almost like the next thing I was going to say. Some paraphrase of what you just said was, who's coming to save me? I mean, who's coming, right? I mean, nobody.
Exactly.
Nobody's coming. I'm here, and I just fell in, and okay, what's next? I mean, I'm on the ground. I'm at the bottom of a hole or whatever that space is, and there's no rescuer. Nobody knows I'm here. It's almost like nobody knows nobody knows I'm here.
Oh my word, that is it. My wording was, they don't even see me. No one even knows I'm here. They're okay with it. It's like, I'm kind of invisible in my pit here.
You know what's interesting about that? Now, I never really made this connection, but I guess in a way, it's a part of maybe having like a second sight, is looking around at the world and realizing that on the outside, all these other human beings that we encounter, we really have all these prejudgments about them, but they might also be in that very space that we're talking about, going through something right on the precipice of a great awakening. And nobody knows they're in it because they're dressed the same. They're doing the same things. They're putting on a smile, shaking hands, saying, how's you doing today? How's the weather? All those niceties that make up a quote, civil society, but they might be right at the edge of a great awakening and nobody knows they're in there.
That is so profound. As you were talking, I remember I write about this. I'm in the pit, and I finally realized, you mean, well, first I realized, oh my word, this is humanity. So many of them are on the verge of their great awakening, or they're in their pits struggling, or they have their own, focus and possibly dilemma, or they're going through some really intense growth or breaking through or whatever. And it's like, to see suddenly humanity like that, it was like, oh, we all are in the same boat.
Yeah.
So if you want out of your pit, Robin, you have to create a ladder. What is going to be your ladder? What can you create a ladder out of here? Well, number one, it's the self-pity. You're just swirling around in your own swill down here. Let's ditch that. That's not going to happen. What do I have? What can I draw on here in myself and in the world? Or, something outside me, a stronger, greater force than myself. Someone might say like the divine or God. Or,
well, I mean, for me, that was what it was like. I mean, I've told the story in varying degrees over the years, but it was like that for me as well. And exactly as you said, when I stop, and in a way it's weird because on one hand, it can sound like I'm saying, well, when you get in a hole, all you have is yourself to lean on. And that can be almost reinforcing the ego to some degree. I mean, you can go, I'm great. I did it all on my own by my own strength and my bootstraps and all that stuff. But really for me anyway, what I almost mean is like, I almost had to give up all of me because everything I had done was what got me there in the first place. And so now that all of me is in here, and all of me got me here, what's going to get me out? And then it's almost like I've always, to some degree, I've called it a mystery. Whatever greeted me and saved me or woke up, maybe nothing woke me up. Maybe I just got out of my own way and was able to see something that was already there all along that I just could not see. Maybe I got hints of it and was sort of wanting it and wanted it, but didn't know what it was. I don't know. It was like a mystery approached. a mystery sort of wrapped its arms around me. And does it make sense? It's like, because I was in the way of it. I was completely in my own way, trapped in my own stuff.
I like that. I totally get this. So many key things you said here about the ego. Like, I think it was couple things about the mystery and about when you're seeing everyone else sort of from my pit. It was very humbling for me. Oh, and I think I got like another key compassion point in my life. Oh, and so my parents, in some ways I started to realize there almost is no such thing as parents. They're just like me.
Yeah.
They were like me when they had me, 25, 27 years old. Oh, my word. They were here. So I started to develop compassion. And first I had my tantrum and my, pity party and all that. And then I realized that wasn't getting me anywhere. And then it's like, oh, my word, humanity. And I wept. I wailed in the forest. They too are all struggling. We all are. This is humanity. And I felt so much love and so humbled, that it was an amazing feeling. And with that, so much I let go of. You're right about to where I write in my second book that I'm working on about a death and kind of a rebirth. That wasn't my words at the time, but I hear people use that now, so it's kind of a communication bridge. But everything that I thought was me and really kind of had been me that I'd taken on was like died in that kind of awakening. It's like in the whole vision of the world and of humanity. And then another feeling. So there's that death and then a rebirth kind of in the forest that's a whole other side thing. But seeing humanity and this feeling of first time in my life wanting to love people. Because I at that age, I assumed, okay, or kind of pondered and made it maybe an assumption at that stage, but if I'm going through this, whether they're varying levels of awareness of where they're at, just like I wasn't aware at first and becoming more aware and blah, 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 but they are like me. They're all in their own way trying to find and build their ladder.
Yeah.
Getting that ego just like trounced on her, just crushed into the dust like that, and having a vaster, more humble, more compassionate view of the world. And that's when I started. There I am, thousands of miles away from humanity. How bizarre is this? And falling in love with humanity.
Yeah.
And when sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm just affirming what you're saying. There's so much here listening to you talk about that. It is interesting because I read a lot of Thomas Merton. He's somebody that I just adore. And, when he talks about going out when he is approved to go live at his hermitage, you can see his writing change. The wording and the deep love and connection that he has for all of humanity, you start to see it really emerge even more so, which is almost incredible to say. But it happened in isolation away from humanity. It was
wow.
Such an odd thing, though, because you think, well, to be with people, you have to love people, you got to be with them. And I do to some degree believe it's kind of like, the Zen thing where you got to go back to the fish market after enlightenment, and still the same fish market. But yeah, it's like that. I mean, it's like you got to get away so you can almost get a perspective. I don't know what else to say, but like get a little mountaintop view so you can see the whole organism. Yeah, so we have to take that time to do that.
Wow, see the whole organism. That is beautiful. Oh yeah, wow, that's what happened in the rainforest. I saw it all as one living organism, not all these separate parts, this devouring this, and no, it was one living organism, totally in love with itself, just creating and taking more of itself, more life, and creating something new, taking in more life, creating something new. And something you said also, Orrin, back a bit ago, you felt wrapped in mystery. Do you remember saying that?
Yeah.
Yeah, that is, I kind of called it the great mystery.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you have to have room for that, right? I mean, that's where beautiful things happen. It's on the edge of something else. I mean, where it's kind of like when you find out you pull up a baseboard or a border on a home, and then you look under there and you find out that you've got something growing under there, and it's a beautiful plant that you didn't know. You see the edge of maybe some trim that you had, like a bordering flower that you put down, and you're like, oh, this pretty little flower along the edge. And then when you dig back, you go, oh my gosh, look at this. It's grown into this huge field that I didn't even know existed. And I'll tell you, it's funny. What made me think about this was I have this little flowering vine that I love in my garden, and I put it there because I was driving down this street in our town, and it's kind of a cut through. There's nothing on it. There's not homes on it. It's sort of like fences on either side of the street. All the homes are on the streets either side of it. And so I like to drive through there and pinch plants, pull me a little plant here and there, something that I can root, because all these homes on the street, they have these gardens that have been left unkept, and in the ditches behind their fences are all these beautiful different plants. And I tell my wife's like, you come home with plants off that street all the time. I said, well, this is a forgotten street, but the backside behind their yards are full of the overgrowth,
Oh, that is so it's funny. A lot of my friends call me Robin Plants because I rob plants. And you're telling this, and I'm just laughing. And it's like, I'm thinking, yeah, you little plants, you go home with Orrin. It's good home.
I'm a plant pinching son of a gun, man. I'm going to pinch them if I find them. You better watch out.
Man. And they thrive at your place. Your photographs of, oh my word, it's like you are so enmeshed in there so intimately. The little skink and the little water lilies and the things that you photograph. Your photography is just stunning. And it's a reflection. It's like you're putting these photos up, right? But you're saying, here, this is who Orrin is.
That's interesting.
And you bring that up, and it's like, whoa, all those pictures lined up like that. And you just like, and it's like, this is Orrin.
But you know what, Robin? I got to say, I've been listening to you say that, and I got to say that's very much how I feel when I'm reading your book. And okay, so yeah, I can take a little flower, and a lot of people do this. I mean, some of our greatest spiritual teachers, that was the way they taught too. They're like, look at the mustard seed, or look at the head of wheat, and they use these things as metaphors. And so I can maybe see a flower and share an inner reflection that I'm having off that one flower. But look at what you did. That's the beautiful thing. You've taken not just a flower, but a whole rainforest, a whole ecosystem all its own, and shared that with the whole world. It's sort of like this kaleidoscopic outpouring. You can look in any direction from that experience and find spiritual metaphor that benefits people's lives. So what values, it's not just, I mean, of obvious great value to you personally, but, you know, to share that story. And as it seems you're sharing it in a second book, that's also, again, just another, you know, beat of that drum, a vibrational ring that just goes out a second time, you know, to get even further into that. And people who read that, it touches their lives. It changes their lives because they go, oh, I want some of that. They may not be able to all go do the rainforest. They may not all be able to get away, but they want just, maybe it doesn't take that. And they just need a taste.
Exactly.
You know?
I agree. What is it? They want life.
Yeah.
They want life. They want that. We all do. I mean, it may get buried, but it's never lost. I don't believe it's ever lost. My little spark was so buried by the time I got to the rainforest, I was dying. And physically dying. But it's always there, and we can never, I feel like we can never distinguish, no, what is it? Extinguish. Extinguish that spark. That's like who we are. It's like someone might call it the God light, or the great mystery, or the life force. It's come from the stars. I mean, it can never be extinguished because we are life.
Yeah.
We are life itself.
Yeah. There's something about that. There's something special about, and maybe many people have had this reflection, but, you know, just for me to rest in the idea that, you know, it's the old joke, if a tree falls in the woods and there's no one there to hear it, does it make a sound? You know, you've heard that. I've heard it. Everybody's heard it. And it's supposed to be a funny little joke, like almost like a Zen koan type of thing. But I think about that almost with humanity sometimes, and not just humans, but I think about just eyes, you know, just a sense, one sense. If there are no senses to perceive these beautiful things that have been created, not just on Earth, but in the whole universe. I mean, how amazing a creature, how amazing a gift. Let me say this. Is it to be a human being, to be able to have all these senses and eyes and a mind to not just witness all of this stuff, which makes it real in a sense, but then to be able to contemplate and put your heart upon it. That is an incredible thing, to think the universe gave rise to its own witness. That's unbelievable.
I have tears right now on my face. I'm sorry. I hope that was recorded. It is so beautiful. I want to hear it again.
Well, I hope it, you know, it's just, it's something I think about sometimes. I'm sure you felt that way in the rainforest, you know? I mean, and you've probably taken that with you now. You're a witness forever, you know?
Yeah. And wow. I feel like in you sharing that, Oren, I feel like I was just seen, and how much life, whether it's a deer or like the deer, the beavers, the different animals that I call in and will come and just stand with me, be with me.
Yeah.
I don't touch them or feed them or anything. They just like come and sit in the space, love. But it's like they too thrive on being seen. Just you putting that out made me feel seen. You made my world real.
But you are those eyes. I mean, it's obvious to me And I'm sure anybody who is attracted to a work like you've put out there, and then the work you're doing with others now, you know, they sense it, they see that. To me, maybe that even is, and I don't know. I mean, I've never really sat and fleshed this thought out, but I mean, maybe that is what we are to be, is to just behold, and in a way that behold the beloved, I guess, to some degree. It's like that we're in a dance. I mean, with the thing that created us, if thing maybe isn't the right word, because that implicates that there's something out there. But we're in a dance, we're in some kind of a relationship with it. I mean, and to be able to witness another creature. I mean, just even going back to the beginning of your book, when you're talking about that snake, I mean, you draw me in as I'm reading those words, and you're describing this creature, and almost the intense anxiety and fear is replaced by this sort of sedative awareness. The way you internally dealt with that and processed it all right there in that moment. I mean, it seemed like you were nose to nose with this creature that could very much take your life, but you were in a relationship with it that went beyond this normal human versus nature, I guess, dynamic that we sort of live in. And so there was like a oneness there, even though there was threat to your life. I don't know. You were a witness to me in that moment.
Yeah, absolutely. Something, and like I said, I always wondered, you wonder, how will I react? They're out there. What'll happen? Will I be able to? And you're trying to prepare yourself, and there really isn't any way. There's going to be that first, at some point, there's going to be an encounter. And something, even, it was almost like there was me with the snake and then this other me marveling. It's this primal, there's this primordial. Part of me just blossomed. Whoa.
Yeah, it's like you got activated.
Yes, it activated something I had never felt in my life, didn't even know was in there, not consciously. And it just activated and starts blossoming and coming into full, presence, and I loved your thing about kind of the sedative. What did you call it? Awareness?
Yeah, like a sedative awareness. It wasn't not like a heightened, sharp awareness where to me, like a sharp awareness would be something where you're really focused on something with an intent. But like a sedative awareness is almost like, to me, again, I'm just making this up as I go along here, but like it's a calming awareness, like you're just in it. You're almost beyond your own skin for a little bit, if that makes any sense.
Absolutely. Almost like there was none of me in it anymore.
Yeah.
Like something of me just like, and something else took over, and yet I was aware, and just information coming, and then knowing I have to respond, just sort of naturally happening. In fact, not even knowing I have to, it just happened. And yet this other part of me kind of here, just marveling over this, my word.
Yeah. It's interesting. I mean, I'm thinking about trying to put myself in your shoes, and I kind of had, especially being in that environment. I mean, I love being in nature, but I've never been in nature long enough for myself to really fully just sort of begin to melt away, or my identifiers. And I guess I started thinking about this as a while back, and then I was reading your book, and it kind of dredged this thought up again. And I thought, nature, I guess it allows for that heightened awareness, because for a human being, perhaps because when we look at nature, we can think of how threatening it can be. It can be very beautiful, but nature threatens us, so there's a fear factor there. But nature by itself is not good or bad, right? I mean, it just, what you talked about, the consuming of the creatures consuming each other, and then new life being born, and then decay, and then bloom. All of that's just life consuming itself to create more life. So nature is violent and is red and tooth and claw and all of that. But it's only the human being that perceives it as dangerous. Other creatures don't perceive it as, have that perception. They don't even have that at all. I mean, they may have fear or survival mechanisms or instincts, but there's not a thought of it being bad or good. It just is. It's like a resting.
Sorry. What was that?
It's like a resting resting in it. They're just in it, you know?
Yes, kind of like it just is. It just is. It's kind of holding us. We're there. And yet humans kind of, can take it even beyond bad to, well, from what I've heard people tell me when we've talked, but it's evil. You know, oh, the evil snake or the evil shark or the evil, you know, some of the predators that when we're in the food chain can potentially kill us, eat us. And the thought that something out there could eat us, I mean, it's like we become very indignant and plus horrified and whatever. Yeah. But, you know, I was thinking, it's like this talking with you is amazing. You have a stunningly beautiful intimacy or communion with nature. It's one that I feel. I mean, you may not be out in it and you know, all the time, or maybe like you said, what you said about for a long time, you know, extended period. But it's like, and I sense this in you just when I was, you know, exploring you on your photos and your interviews and different things on the internet, but it's like, oh, Lauren is a force of nature. He's moving through this world, through this culture, as nature. Oh my God! And I sat there one day, just something I had read, you'd written, and something I'd looked at, and tears just kept coming to my eyes. And I said, I know this life force. He's nature. He's nature. And even beyond, well, nature is, to me, is the divine. You know, nature is like my church.
Oh, God, yes. I relate to that. When that right there, I probably, like you, I have to assume that you're probably not in a particular religious tradition of any kind. And I'm not either. I mean, I have things that I've adopted into my life, you know, and I treat that the same way as I almost treat plants, you know. Like I said, I'm a plant pincher, and maybe you're the same way, but I pinch religion as well and spiritual practices as well. It's like, you know, if something resonates and if it will take root, that's the other thing, like the rooting of a thing. I mean, I can pinch plants and then bring them back, but if they don't acclimate properly and I can't get them to root, it'll never grow here. You know?
Exactly.
And so I find spiritual practice and religions to be similar. It's like, oh, that I look at that the same way and go, oh, that will probably root in me. That resonates, and it will probably root and graft if I practice it, if I apply it.
Yeah, so we practice it, apply it, feel into it, observe it, understand it, and we embrace it. It takes root. Yeah. Wow, that is beautiful. I've never heard anyone say that.
Well, I mean, makes a mutt and a messy thing for people on the outside sometimes, because I think we want to be able to identify each other by markers. I think that's very much a part of our culture and our society. It's very much, who are you? And what I mean by who are you is, what do you do? Where do you live? Who are you married to? Where do your kids go to school?
Yeah, right. Where'd you go to school?
Yeah. What religion, what church do you go to? And it's all those things. And I don't mean to say those with the tone I did just now. I mean, I'm not trying to say those are bad things, but that tends to be the markers people quickly sum you up as. And so when you don't have a traditional marker, and I'm sure you've probably experienced this, it's a little harder for someone to get there, put you in something, and that maybe makes it seem a little what's the word? Just a little odd. I'll just use a simple word. It's a little odd to some people. They go, I'm not sure where that is. I'm not sure what you are. So I'm going to keep my distance. And then other people are attracted, but they don't know why.
Oh, yeah.
Because it's something alien. It's like, I'm not familiar with this, or this strange mixture of things usually don't go together. So yeah, it's a little odd. I mean, it's a strange existence. I mean, surely, because there's some comfort and security, and maybe even a little ego boost when you are involved or accepted by a tribe, right? I mean, when a tribe accepts you because you've made yourself fit.
Exactly.
I mean, there's that feeling of belonging that everyone desires so much, and only because we've been tricked or maybe taught that we don't belong, but actually, right? I mean, you know this from going into the rainforest. You already belong.
Yes. Oh, we already do. Already do. It's almost like it may get buried, but really, my feeling is that we can never not belong. It's like just remembering that we already do.
Yeah. No doubt.
I remember. Sorry, no, go ahead.
No, that was it. Just affirming what you said. Yeah.
I reached a point where once I kind of climbed out of the pit, accepted, and saw humanity and cried, and I wailed for myself, wailed for my parents, wailed for my grandparents, wailed for all of humanity. I mean, I'd go into the forest where miles around, no one could hear me. I had that great gift of being able to wail. I felt like I was wailing for all of humanity. I mean, I think we can all, that kind of is in us. When we connect to all of us, and we develop for the first time, well, I did in my life, empathy. And so we feel our own feelings, and we understand how others can feel and do feel. And I mean, there may be variances and whatever, we're all unique, I think, but there's an overall feeling of empathy. Oh, they're like me. And you feel this amazing, for me, I did, sense of belonging. Oh, we're all in the same boat. And then kind of I went through a phase where I, like you talked about the ego, like so humbled, realizing it wasn't the way I thought, and it was, it was everyone, we were all kind of the same. And it's not good or bad, right or wrong, and sort of opening up so vastly in myself, I had no defenses left. And my whole life started just unfolding, memories going back and back and back, things I'd forgotten, both amazingly beautiful and horrifically painful. And I mean, the whole mix, and seeing both the gifts that I was given, like my dad, today's his birthday.
Wow.
He's no 5, but today is his birthday. And he gave me the gift of nature. He got rid of our TV when I was probably 4 years old, and he said, I want my kids, I don't want them watching other people's lives. I want them living their own lives.
Yeah.
And he started taking us into nature. I mean, 6 kids. How did he do that? But anyway, he did, and it was a huge gift. And so going through my life, finally just committing, okay, show me, lay it on me. And like falling in love with things, and then horrified and wailing and feeling fears and heading straight into it. And I started having dreams and visions and memories for about 3 months, 2 to 3 months. And during that time, I did a vow of silence. Didn't speak one word to anyone.
How long?
What was that?
How long did you do that?
3 months.
Wow.
Not one word. No, other than crying or wailing. And I knew I was saving. At some point, I realized I was saving my soul, that if I didn't want to die, that I had to let life in. And that's what life was, the whole mixed bag, the good, the bad, the ugly. And thinking, though, still some part of me thinking when I got to the end of this journey, this incredibly deep, intense, at times terrifying, at times just so much beauty. I could, my thin little body could hardly contain it. It couldn't, I'd be almost sobbing from the sheer beauty of life. And thinking when I got to the end, then I would find I'd be with the real Robin.
Ah, yes.
But when I got to the end, it was all gone, empty. Everything behind me vaporized. And there was just I called it the great nothingness or the great emptiness. And during those, then probably for another couple of months, I don't even think I spoke then either, because I was every day going from wherever we were camped, or at one point we started to build the place, but I was torrential rain and I was hiking naked every day, miles into the rainforest. And I remember feeling like what had I done? What have I done here? I've obliterated Robin. I've killed her.
Oh, wow.
Oh, my God. I've killed her. I can't get that back now. I've burned all my bridges. I can't, I can't make numb what I know now. I can't undo the knowing. I can't undo that. And because I know now, I've seen, I went back and looked at it. I can't undo this. And now I have nothing. And one day, I had hiked up into the jungle, followed a creek, the rainforest. And I sat down and I was sitting there and I said, okay, I can handle this nothingness. It's the first real, honest, true feeling I have ever felt. It's mine. And I'm claiming it as mine. I knew it was solid, honest. I knew it through every cell of my body, my being. And it was who I was. And then I said, but am I going to always be here alone?
Oh, man.
And I started to cry. And I hadn't been able to cry for quite a while. And I heard a voice go through me, and it said, you are not alone, child. I am here in this great nothingness. You are me. Now that you are empty, there is room for me to come in.
Man, that's something. That's it right there, isn't it?
That, for me, it was. And there I knew who I was. There was, I don't even know if I have words, Oren. I don't even know how I'm trying to write this. I don't even know.
Because it's beyond, it's beyond words. I mean, words are only, at this point, listening to you talk about that emptying out of yourself, your identity, and then what's it say in the Tao Te Ching? That which has no substance enters where there is no space. That is what that reminds me of. It's like it permeated you. You were permeated by. It wasn't that it wasn't there, but once all the little pieces, that identity, start to get stripped away, what was already there begins to reveal itself. It can be heard.
Wow. I feel.
Yeah, you're familiar with, I'm sure you are familiar with Buckminster Fuller.
Yes.
He had a similar story to that. I was watching a documentary many years ago about him, and he was talking about, how he was going to commit suicide. He was at the end. I mean, he was just ready. Everything he'd done, he felt like was a failing, and in his marriage, and there was just more to him than what I guess he wanted to do, more than I guess the world was ready to accept to some degree, is what it what I seemed to gather from it. Mm-hmm. But he was ready to end it all. And then he had a thought, what if I live, instead of killing this body, what if I live the rest of my life as if this me that I want to kill did die? And this new me just is for humanity. And so he sort of steps out of his own way. And then all of a sudden, then we start to see everything changed for him. I mean, and then the things his concepts and his thinking, I mean, it all just shattered. And when you watch him speak, some of these old archives, you can see, I mean, like there was something else going on in his perception that shifted. Yeah. After that, it was like that self had to be removed, and something divine just woke up. I know we look at him as like an architect, and it was beyond that. I mean, way beyond. Agree.
I agree. Wow. You say so many, and just like a handful of sentences. There are so many powerful things. It's like I'm listening. I go, oh yeah, that. Oh my God, yes, that. And then like I gotta say something about that. And then the next sentence, oh that. Oh yeah. It's like that.
You know what, Robin? I think that's not me. I think that's just good synergy between two people. We're having I mean, I think that's what happens when you get tuning forks, right? Tuning forks that vibrate together, the sound expands. I think because I'm listening to you, and I mean, really just witnessing with my ears right now, because I can't see you, but listening to you talk and tell this. It's such a treat for me, because reading your words creates one type of resonance and vibration, but like actually hearing you speak is because I said, like I told you, I haven't finished the book. So now I get to read it and apply your tones and inflections to it, and your sincerity too. I mean, there's going to be moments, I'm sure, as I'm reading it and finishing it, where I hear you, your like emotions come out, right? I mean, that's going to be a wonderful experience, because there's an authentic love there. That's what you did. You shared your experience with us with love, and now I get to have that extra layer. Hopefully people listening to this conversation will get to have that experience too.
Oh, that's so beautiful. It makes me think how it's two things. One is, so much is really about the energy, isn't it? Mm. I often have said, like, the energetic fabric of life, or like, so all of us, like, just listening to you then and all along here, all afternoon, it's like, I'm like, oh my God, I will never, ever forget this. I knew this. Talking with you would be possibly a one-of life experience. I mean, this isn't an interview, Oren. This is a healing. This is not only healing, both, like making both of us, like when I say healing, it nurtures us, fosters us, makes us stronger, more alive. And then that energy, we are in the world then with that added energy. And I think that is so much, it's like that is what needs to happen, the healing of the culture, the world, wherever healing and energy is needed, and life and vivacity, and oh my word, it's this.
It's true. I mean, I hope I can't remember the exact turn of phrase, and I wish I could, but it was from something in Shantadeva's Way of the Bodhisattva, and it was something to the effect of, may anyone who encounters me, I'm going to mess this all up. Gosh, such a treasure, and I'm going to butcher it, but it's to the effect of, if someone encounters you in your life, let it be of value to them. You know, and that's to me, I was like, yeah, you can be, just by being present, you know, I mean, just being present and being a good listener. And if, you know, I love listening, but I also love responding too, because I mean, you're a generous responder. You can tell that by talking to you. I mean, you're a very generous responder because you're listening and you don't hold back from sharing a good thing. You don't hold back when you say, you can tell I want to say this to you. I want to recognize, going back to that elf quest thing, I want to recognize you. And I mean, I think that's a great gift. That's medicine, especially for aching hearts. I mean, so many people just want, if someone can see the divine in them, then they could maybe begin to see the divine in themselves. And then when they start to do that, they don't feel alone anymore, because there's this poverty of isolation in a world full of people.
Yeah, Gino, boy, that's a powerful thing. I've been reading about that loneliness or isolation, you know, feeling cut off and lonely. It's an epidemic. I think in England they appointed made a whole special minister for dealing with the loneliness epidemic. They made like a special department, you know, the minister of loneliness.
Yeah.
And I mean, to try to deal with the epidemic, the crisis of, you know, people feeling cut off from each other, not just during this pandemic. It's been going on long before that, and in fact, that was set up even before the pandemic to try to, you know, so people can, what are the ways we can help people connect more and feel connected? And I love the way you just described that, like one person, you know, you said, and maybe they can feel a bit more, yeah, I forget what word you used, but kind of connected, not so lonely. And so then they're more apt to reach out to people. And I think there's a lot of strength for us all, healing strength in this kind of connection, you know, and in a more real connection. You know, Oren, I actually printed this out to read back to you. And I mentioned, I think, in one of my messages, it is one of the most powerful, if it's all right with you, I'm going to put it on my wall and I'll
please do, yeah.
You wrote, sometimes all we need is a friend that is willing to be with us, to listen, and perhaps offer gentle, experiential guidance while we find our way. And that is so loaded with so much goodness there. I mean, straight off the bat, I feel like our psychology, our healing modalities all need to turn more toward and start to include more experiential sharing. You know, like someone's in crisis or they're hurting or they are lost, and you listen, and then they might ask you, what do you think? And instead of offering heavy, I don't know, like, what you would call it. I can't think of the word, like lots of information and this, you know, concepts and, you know, when this happens, this is this, and, you know, structure and analysis, and to offer, you know, I had an experience once, and maybe this, you'll relate to this, some of my experience. And I was in, you know, crisis, and I felt whatever the person's feeling, like I felt depressed, or I felt this. And it was really challenging. And then I started to think about this, and then, or I had this happen or that. And it kind of helped. a bit. Or someone came and they helped me. They said this or this. I went and did this. I love those experiential stories and sharings. And I think we've lost first so much of the oral tradition, that was in our early indigenous cultures. And it's a pretty grave loss, more than I think we may realize yet. But we've lost it almost in many ways throughout our culture, where we share, we don't share much of ourselves. We might share, and we all do that, because, we read something and we share it. I've done that, and it can be good, and those can be useful and really neat and help. But you, like today, you sharing all these things from your life, it's like, wow. There's so much, there's some kind of power inherent in sharing experiential guidance, as you called it. That is beautiful. You could write a book about that, Oren. That is so you. I think it's kind of me. It might be kind of me. That's why I relate to it too.
Yeah, maybe so. It's probably why. It's funny you should say that, because when I was reading your book, there were several times, and I've had this thought quite a few times actually, because I enjoy writing, mostly just to express in the hope that someone is going to get something out of it, not for some kind of pat on the back, but to go, hey, maybe someone will read some words and it will hit them in the right way. That's really ultimately all it boils down to for me. But when I read books like yours and others, I have that thought. I think, any of these books could change your life. They're not ultimately on some ultimate level of ultimate reality. They're all trying to wake you up. They're trying to give you a portrait of reality that is much more dynamic than what we're living in under the clock, And I think we don't need another one. There's almost no way we need another one, because there's already so many. I could spend the rest of my life and never run out of these. But,
right.
It's kind of like podcasts. There's so many and new ones every day. And so many of us in this podcast community or world, we have conversations amongst each other, and we're like, should we keep going? There's already this one. There's already that one. There's so many. But, there's just the one thing we all seem to come back to is there's just that off chance that there's that person out there that's going to hear that thing that's going to stick with them. And so you just stick those messages in a bottle and just throw them out in the ocean. And I think books are like that too. It's like, look, it needs to be birthed, give birth to it, put it out there. Like you and I, whenever we connected online socially, I didn't know about your book at first. We were just in sort of a digital relationship. The book came second, but it's a blessing nonetheless. It's like, oh, wow, what an extra layer, to be able to dive into your story that way. That's a beautiful thing, and the fact, if you hadn't have put it out there, I wouldn't be able to do that. So yeah, it's interesting. And then, as you said at the beginning, when we first started talking, putting that book out there has drawn so many new things to you, to where you can help so many people in so many different ways now that you wouldn't potentially have been able to do before.
Yes. And you know what? I think it's that, and I really believe, I wrote because I was compelled. I'd written 1,500, 2,000 pages when I first came out of the rainforest. I didn't write anything in there, never hardly took any photographs or anything. But I couldn't stop. It was a way of still staying connected to the magnitude of what I had lived, experienced, while I was back out in my culture and trying to adjust. and I probably never will adjust, yet I'm learning how to love out here, how to love. Or that love is the connection. The love with other people is my rainforest.
Oh, wow. Wow. Yeah. I like that. That, boy. Yeah. That's an interesting thing. And you can go anywhere now, right? I get this.
Yeah.
Yeah. The rainforest is a fixed place in space and time. That experience exists in time somewhere on the timeline, but you can touch it anywhere now. It's in you. It's a part of you.
That's exactly it. Wow, that's beautiful.
You're with people and it comes alive. Again, the rainforest is there when you're having connections with people, everything you learn. That's a beautiful thing.
Do you know, when I first came out, I thought, people would ask something, so were there snakes? And I'd tell them just some story innocently, and you'd see them zone out. They couldn't comprehend, like I couldn't first comprehend when I went from, my culture into the rainforest. Is like, I can't even comprehend this place. So many things, the fears, the joys, the beauty, the primalness, the magnitude of that. And it was I realized, okay, this isn't about them seeing me. And this was fairly early when I came out. And I was, what's happening? What is this? It's about loving them right where we're all at. Just loving. And love was the connection, just like it ended up being in the rainforest. That was the connection. Loving. I fell in love with even the most deadly snakes I handled. I saw them. Oh, they're not evil. They're this beautiful little innocent life who's lived how many millions of generations here?
Mm-hmm.
They're life. Can I look at this, hold this snake on my arm, in my hand, and see me? That's me. That's me. And when you were talking about writing, I think the greatest urge was, the whole time I wrote my book, was love, like some kind of compulsion. And I see that in all your work, your speaking, your interaction with people, your photography, the little, two little brief lines that you put with your photos. You're about love. And so maybe we're compelled by love and we put that out. And there's so many, we're all, in some ways, we're like all the same, and yet we all get to what is the saying, there's many paths to the top of the mountain.
Yeah.
So someone might not relate at all to my book, but they would come and read your book and be like, whoa, I get this guy. And there's their door. The door's open. There's their connection. They've like, okay, what is it when the spaceships and, they have to connect in space there, the different parts? I don't know what.
Like the ports where they connect, the airlocks or whatever.
Yes, exactly, the airlock. And they connect and, they dock in there. And it's like they found their docking.
Wow, I like that too.
They're blossoming there. They can finally, they found a home base, a docking.
I like that. That kind of makes me think even, that airlock, the airlock is getting you to breathe, and breath being spirit. So it's like you're getting an airlock on something that's going to sustain you.
That's beautiful, isn't it? Yeah. So you lock in and then you ensured you have air to breathe. That's beautiful. I love that. I love the way you, like I said, you're a visionary, the way you see. It's, oh man.
And I'm happy I know.
Hello, Good News listeners and friends. It's time for the Fishing for Goodies segment of Find the Good News, where I take a back seat and let the questions from the Good News Fishbowl take over the interviewer role. If you're a longtime listener, then you know that normally there was an ad right here for the Brimstone Museum and Henning Cultural Center in Sulphur, Louisiana, my hometown and the place where I produce Find the Good News. Thanks to the devastation caused by Hurricane Laura, instead of an ad, I'm making an appeal. Hurricane Laura, the strongest hurricane to hit Louisiana in over 150 years, made landfall on the crossover hours between Wednesday, August 26th and Thursday, August 27th. This monster storm made a straight path from my hometown, Sulphur, and her sister city, Lake Charles, Louisiana. I evacuated that Wednesday evening ahead of the storm and returned the Friday after, and one of the most heartbreaking things I saw was the devastation of our historic treasure, the Brimstone Museum. Trying to describe the scale of the damage to Southwest Louisiana escapes words. Every resource imaginable was brought to its knees: utilities, water, gas, food, shelter, and medical. Life instantly returned to a cycle of shoring up supplies to survive the coming heat, humidity, stabilization, and recovery. While national news media has moved on, the multi-layered human suffering remains, especially for our poorer communities made even more vulnerable in the aftermath of this savage storm. The road to recovery will be long, and many of the decisions and actions of our national, regional, and local politicians could be put under well-deserved scrutiny at this time. But what can't be criticized is the goodwill, mercy, compassion, tenderness, and drive to help that we've seen from local and regional volunteers. Each day they bring hot food, water, cleaning supplies, tarps, gasoline, and set up every single day in parking lots serving from sunrise to dusk. One particular organization, Care Help of Sulphur, mobilized immediately. Volunteers selflessly putting their own needs aside to care for the citizens of Sulphur with all of their varied needs. I've put a link to the website of Care Help of Sulphur on my website, as well as some reflections and links, photos, and video about what we are facing right here in Sulphur, Louisiana, the home of Find the Good News. You can find that at findthegood.news/donate. That's findthegood.news/donate. The link is also in this episode's show notes. In fact, this episode was produced on power provided by the loving gifts and efforts of this podcast's guests and listeners. Any help offered to Care Help of Sulphur or Find the Good News in the aftermath of Hurricane Laura is deeply appreciated. Brimstone Museum will be saved and hold this spot once again someday. Care Help will continue to serve the people of this city. Good people will always rise up to do good works when there is a need. Now, let's take that dive in the fishbowl.
The last part of this show, I call it Fishing for Goodies. And what I have, and you can't see this, but it's a fishbowl that is filled with questions that I've put in here and that many of my past guests have put in here and that listeners have put in here. And so what I've done traditionally with each guest at the end of our conversation is I pull 3 questions out of here and we just let the universe pick them, so to speak, and see what comes out. And we'll have a little conversation about these questions.
Oh, okay.
So
would you like to do?
Yeah, okay. I'd love it if you're willing to do it. Let's do it.
Oh, yeah. If I can't answer, I'll just say pass.
They're not too bad. So let's see. I'm going to go ahead and reach in here and let's see what we got. So the first question is, okay, this is a good one. And we know the answer, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Can people change?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, people will tell me all the time, well, so-and-so, they aren't going to change. No, they won't change. I can't even find that in my body, in my being. It may not be in my desired time frame, but life is not static. It isn't. It's kind of flow is to change. And it may not be in someone to the extent that, this is terrible to say, that I would like to see, or if I get my ego in there, that I think they should, which is ridiculous. But I believe we all are in motion, motion. And that's why I love emotions.
Yeah, me too.
Because they're fluid, they're moving. And it's why I encourage people can have any emotion with me, and I'm not, even anger. I don't care. They could even say, can I vent my hate? Sure, knock yourself out. I'll just sit here. Go for it. And I have seen people even attack their emotions, or approach is the better word, approach their emotions from hate until they're just down on their hands and knees sobbing their eyes out because they were allowed to follow that. To allow to start where they are at. And there is unbelievable beauty in that. That was me. That was me one time. I allowed whatever was. My only rule is I don't emotionally or physically hurt another person.
Oh, wow.
But
That's your line. I like that. That's beautiful. You've set a parameter. You've set your own boundary, and what a good one. I mean, to say that. I mean, to say, look, I will not hurt you. We may go a lot of places, but I'm not going to hurt you.
Absolutely. And so it allows for a more holistic experience for people to start where honestly, be honest, not like this is what's happening, but I shouldn't have that, so I should start over here. That doesn't really nurture change. I haven't found that, not in myself or when I've witnessed others. It's like being able to start right where we are at, I'm very comfortable with that in other people, and find beauty in it all, and sort of watching the unfolding of the human spirit or soul.
I love that. I mean, because we all really are, right? I mean, I would love to, on one hand, there's like this part of me that sometimes says, oh, if you would have just never taken any side roads when you had your initial awakenings experience, then you would be a different person. You'd be doing something different for the world. There's all these what ifs.
Oh yes, I can have those too.
But like without those side roads, I mean, who knows what it takes for a plant to unfold? I mean, maybe it needed those things. Maybe I needed those side roads. Maybe I have for me to bloom. I mean, there's some things that has bloomed through their whole lives and they bloom once. I mean, maybe that's what it is, and that's okay. We're all different in that regard. I mean, we have to go through what we're going through. I say have to. We go through what we go through.
I know what you mean.
And if we use it the right way, it's a pruning, I guess, to some degree.
When you were saying that about, yes, exactly, and about the side roads, and I teared up because it felt, and when you were saying, just being that honest, like, I had these side roads, and, well, maybe if I hadn't taken the side roads, and I suppose someone could say, oh, well, you have regrets or whatever. Yeah, I can feel regret, but when I really go back and look and get past kind of maybe that kind of lump of social conditioning, but I allow myself all those feelings, even regrets. I allow myself to head right into them. But I loved what you were saying because it's compassionate. We are human and we can be messy and confused, and we don't. How can we know what we don't know? I mean,
right. I love that. That's right. Right.
I mean, and I love people that have had the side roads and it's like people were going back to Chris into the wild there, and his story into Alaska there, and some people were judging. It's like, I love that guy. I still feel him today.
Yeah.
I can talk to him sometimes and say, I see you, Chris. I see you.
You know, what's interesting. This is such an interesting thing. I mean, that we're talking about this again, because I probably glazed over my real true feelings about him but you went into them. I mean, just by being authentic, because the truth of the matter is, yes, I agree with what you just said wholeheartedly. Like, I don't even know how to express it. I mean, my wife and I've had this conversation many times, but, I think there's many things where Chris's spirit of whoever he was is almost entangled with so many of these projects that have surrounded him and his story, and it's touched so many lives. I mean, even just the soundtrack to the movie. I was watching an interview with Eddie Vedder, and he said in that interview, he sat down and wrote all of those songs at once, and he said it was like it just came to him. He said, I've never had an experience like that before. So I just sat down. I didn't have it. It was effortless. I just sat down with my guitar and I started writing, and they all just came out. When you listen to that soundtrack, it's like Chris is in it. He's in the music, so I get what you're saying. I mean, 100%. There's something happens when a being just is who they are. And they're not ashamed. And he got to that point where there was nothing left. I mean, he was only who he could be in front of God and no one else. I mean, it was just him and nature and himself and God. That was it. I mean, just all alone. Something has to happen. You are completely stripped away from all the things that have made you a somebody to people.
Yeah. And in that time, it's almost like you said, between him and God, and it's like almost like a starburst. His whole being just expands, and it's so. He acted with such courage, and I don't mean just that he went to a remote area, but courage that he stepped out of. He braved breaking convention, breaking conditioning, breaking the rules. I mean, that was huge. It upset people and family and, the friends. And, just like to break those kind of ties, and not with any intention to hurt anybody.
Right.
But it's almost like, if I don't, I will die. I relate to that. That was me.
I get that. I mean, maybe I don't even know if this is unpopular or popular or who this resonates with out there. But the truth of the matter is, it's very similar to the way I feel about Jesus. I mean, it's very, very much in the same concept. I mean, I go, okay, yes. Would Chris's sister just love for him to be able to hold her children and watch them grow up and play on the beach? Yes, absolutely. Would we love it? Would Jesus's disciples have loved for him to just have a meal with them and walk with them and laugh with them and sleep under olive trees with them? Yes, absolutely. But then that isn't what happened. He became something else. Completely bigger and different. And so that leaves it to Chris, and it's kind of goes back to what my friend had said in that inscription. He became sort of like a sacrifice. So now we have to go, he did this for us in some strange way. And so now when we go enjoy nature, we have to remember that we can go home, because he didn't. And we have to pay attention when we're out there. And it's the same way I feel about Jesus. It's like, yeah, he's not here. His hands aren't here. His feet aren't here. He can't hold, he can't feed the homeless and clothe the naked, but I can. Yeah, right. I can do that. And so, it's like, that's the mystical bigger that these people become. I mean, they get fused with something, with reality in a whole nother way, because of their sacrifice that's beyond what we can understand.
And What was that? I'm sorry, Oren. What
No,
was
no,
the
no. I
last
mean,
part?
that was it. That was just a trail off. I mean, but yeah, it spreads as you were saying. Go on, please, because yeah, I think that's
Like, this is really profound. My word, I love the depth of your feeling and seeing. And I mean, it's so far beyond just thought. I mean, whoa. I mean, this is incredible what you're saying. This is exactly how I experienced it when I read that. And then I saw the movie. And it was just like, oh my word. Like when I said it was like a starburst and all this light went out everywhere for people, for everyone, like this huge messages even, and he died and left a gift.
yeah,
He left a gift. And it was almost way more powerful. And I don't wish anyone death that way or any way. I don't wish death on anyone. But it was all, like you said, he almost sacrificed his life and said, I'm going to do this. Like people to leave kind of like a wake-up call, to help people wake up on a big planetary way, in a big way.
Mm.
And I felt that when I read that. It's like, oh no, this guy is not to be judged. This is, oh my word, the magnitude of this, what he's done for himself, for the world, for me, it was huge. It was huge.
Well, I mean, not to further beat that connection to Christ, to death, but I mean, even if we even just use the biblical scriptures as a reference for that, I mean, Chris wanted to go home. He had his moment of despair. I mean, he knew his death was coming. And there probably, I get the impression that there was some regret. I mean, if you go read some of his journal entries that, oh God, I want to be with people, that I do want to be with my family for all its faults. We see the same exact thing in scriptures and in biblical scriptures where Christ says, God, why have you forsaken me? There's a moment there where you do get the feeling like I'm sorry to be crass, but it's like oh my God, I'm all alone. In this one moment, I'm all alone. I'm in despair. For a moment, I'm afraid.
Do you know, and I think out of that, Lauren, it's not crass at all. It's beautiful. And for me, out of that, oh my God, I'm alone. And realizing how alone I was. Even, Ian saw what I'd been through.
Mm.
But he'd say, I can't feel it, but I know it's huge. I do see. But I felt, even from him, from everything, so alone. But like you were saying with Christ, about being forsaken, and then with Chris, knowing, and out of that, for me, was born longing. And so from that place of like regret, that's why we're allowing regrets, allowing them with beauty and honor and grace, and embracing them and allowing ourselves to feel them, they can give birth to longing. And for me, it was like, I didn't have the words at the time, but longing to go home, to go, and not home to my family. This was a bigger home, something I had lost. Home, like God, the mystery, this vast cosmic intelligence. That's too linear saying it that way, but kind of God, or for me, it gave birth to longing, and that's a healthy thing.
Mm-hmm.
Because that longing for me was like a TV antenna going up.
Mm.
And then the God, the great mystery. Whoa! It comes right in there. Speaks to our longing. It's like a magnet. For me, my longing is a magnet for the great mystery, for God.
I love this. I resonate with that 100%. I do. I say that because it's been my experience too, that longing, because that sometimes is where there's like this well of emotion that exists, and it's got sorrow in it, but it's also got joy in it too. It's like an elixir. And, you know, it makes me weep. Yeah. I mean, I get it. It's like I weep because I long for it, and yet it's as close. It's closer than my own breath. It's weird because it's like this, it's almost like there's this feeling that it's something yet to be obtained, but yet it's in that moment of longing where you are with it. I don't know. It's a mystery for sure, you know?
Beautiful. Oh, that's beautiful. In that moment of longing, you are with it. Absolutely. And this is why I feel our regrets, we can't dishonor them. They aren't to be, and I see sometimes in the culture people will say, oh, so you have regrets, do you? Like it's something to be got over, something to be done away with or exorcised out of us or, no. Yes, I have regrets.
Oh, yeah. I mean, look, Robin, I'm hearing you say that, and I have a regret that perhaps someday it may be rectified in this lifetime, potentially, but it may not be. And it causes me great pain, but I only, just as you said, you go in the forest and you weep and wail. I do this over this one regret from time to time, and it is like, again, I don't know any other word. It's like the release of a sneeze or almost orgasmic to some degree, because the wailing, it's like forgiveness. That's the only thing I can think of, is like those moments are like being healed, even though I'm wailing and weeping and in pain, but it's coming out, and it comes out, and there's some like a feeling of release, and I know that it will come again. And it's almost like it's not trying to be taken from me, actually. Somewhere in the midst of that, that's when I don't think about the release as the divine part. Oddly enough, in my memory, when I think of it, the part that's the most attractive is actually the wailing.
Oh, yes, I know.
It's weird. I don't know how to say it any other way.
Oh, I know, you said it so beautifully. I really feel, like you said, in there you are wailing or, crying. And I've even, like for myself, mine often started out as rage, and then I fall to my knees, and that would go to sobbing and wailing, and there was the healing. That is the healing. And then I've even pondered this at times, Oren. And I totally understand what you're saying. It is beautiful. It is so magnificent. I mean, wow. I'm just, I'll never get over this conversation ever. But, I feel like there's another thing you said, and then it comes up again. Like and one day I remember I have something in my life, things, one that's larger than another, and one day I thought, I was going to sleep, and I thought, so I keep having this. I must, maybe this was years back. I must not be really dealing with it somehow. And then I heard this voice say, no, it will always be there as a guide. You do not want to lose this. There is nothing to get over, get rid of. This is a guide. You want to be able to feel this. And so it made me, it's like a guide. Like, so I know kind of, and I don't usually use these words, but kind of right from wrong, or I can have values or morals or value things or see how I do want to be or how to behave or how I do want to do things. So that is alive there as almost like a living intelligence. And to feel that at that depth, that wailing depth, it's like, okay, I'm human, I'm alive. And now I know from this, thank you. Thank you for showing me, what I don't want to do and what I do want to do.
Man, that's wonderful.
Kind of like a teacher or a guide that goes with my life through me, throughout my life with me. And pops up every now and then. It's a reminder.
This is what I love about these fishbowl questions, because they are catalysts for these incredible, they're like seeds that just blossom into these wonderful conversations, because they start somewhere and then they just keep expanding into new territory. And I love it because, we potentially wouldn't have talked about some of these things, without that question.
No, it's a great idea.
All right. You ready for your next question?
Sure.
Okay. This one it's so funny because it has the word simple in it, but I can't imagine the answer to this is simple. But let's just see. What is the simplest truth you can express in words?
I'll just go with the one that comes off the top of my head. There is no death.
Oh, love that.
And I don't know why that one came, but I looked at the deepest into me.
Well, you know what? I'm going to ask you your third question, because that's so odd that that's your answer to that question. Because your third question that I pulled says, and hold on, before I ask you this question, I think we should, I'll ask the question. Let me just ask it. If you knew you would die tomorrow, would you feel cheated today?
I might have not regrets of what I didn't do, but, there's so much more I want to live.
Right.
I love life. And would I feel cheated? No, because although I have been through so much in my life, in the trenches, man, it's why people can tell me anything and it doesn't even bother me. They can have any emotion in it, and I'm just like, oh, this is life. Wow. It's life. You make me feel. I love you for that. I don't care, even if they're angry, they're raging about something. It's like, wow, you're alive.
Wow, that's really something special. That's not something everybody can say. Not everybody has not worked through their own stuff enough to get to that point where they can say that. Really. That's something very special. That's a very rare group of people that you are a part of that have been able to experience that place, I think it's beautiful.
That's so dear that you reflect that back to me. I just, you can live something and just, it's such a part of you. You don't think about it. You just experience who you are,
Yeah.
And I like to embrace. And that was, Orem, being in the wild like that. Nature just embraces everything we are with so much compassion that it's almost like any regret you have just vaporized. You're so loved. And so in my life now, I really work it, or remind myself. I can't say work it because I wouldn't know what that means, but I remind myself all the time, Robin, embrace it all. You wouldn't be who you are without it. You wouldn't be able to give space, like this quote that I love of yours, willing to be with, to listen, and offer gentle experiential guidance. I wouldn't be able to do any of that. Any of that. And it comes like just like rain. It's as easy as rain falling from the sky, and that is probably the part of me I love the most. And it's where my love for humanity comes from. I can just embrace and want to embrace them, everything around me.
That's a beautiful gift to be given, even though so people who've never experienced that broad of a feeling of love, of compassion for people that they haven't met. That gets into some really mystical territory that a lot of folks don't get to experience, or they haven't allowed themselves to experience. A weeping and a mourning and a joy and an almost overwhelming love for people and creatures, for the whole world. You know, and the fact that you're willing to share that so openly, you know, that it gives people a chance to see what it looks like. You know, I mean, it's easy for us to love the people near us and dear to us and our pets and not expand our coworkers maybe, and not expand it beyond that, you know, to get into the people that we don't know, that we can only imagine, or to the ones we see at a distance, you know, but to actually have a heart big enough to do that. I mean, it's going to weep because it gets stretched to some degree.
That's beautiful. And the way you were putting like pearls on a string, you said the weeping, the wailing, the joy, and you listed all these different emotions, the whole kind of range of them. And I had this feeling like while you were talking, I mean, I started to tear up again. It was so beautiful. And I thought, oh, wow. In Oren's presence, I don't feel any regrets because everything of me can be embraced. And so then I immediately had this thought, oh, maybe that's more of a cultural thing. There's an energy, can be maybe a potential cultural energy that, number one, we shouldn't have regrets. You know, kind of live a perfect life without regrets, which, hell, I've never been able to do that.
Right, me either. Me.
So it's like, you know, I mean, okay, you can kiss me goodbye. You know, I'm kicked off the team here. You know, but it's like, and then I thought, so maybe it's which hand is holding us? You know, which is cradling us? And like in your hand, the hand that you put out to cradle people, everything, I feel my own divinity, my own innate God-given perfection, even amidst all my supposed imperfections. You know, the things I did that, you know, we might regret, the things that might hurt another person, the times where we, you know, allowed someone else to hurt us or didn't dare speak up, or the times that, I mean, any number of situations.
Mm-hmm.
And like the hand that you hold out, oh my word, I just breathe so deep. And none of it matters. I start to see my own beauty, my own wholeness, and so maybe we have to be aware of that. What hand is holding us? And even a hand as vast as a culture.
Yes. God, that's beautiful. Yes. What hand is holding us? Even so vast as a culture. That's true. I mean, it really is, because we're we're talking about regrets and things like that, and how we're saying, you know, no, don't get rid of them, because sometimes they're the very, you know, touchstone that gets you back into the right space that you need to be in. And we don't live in a culture that tells us to do that at all. We live in a culture that tells us to relive our sins and to suffer for our regrets, and for them to be dredged up and to be weaponized against us, and to weaponize them against others. And Yeah, it's not the hand that's raising us, and that's the thing, is it could be, but it would take us doing it. I mean, collectively being just a more nurturing nest, really building a nest of love for people to live in.
Yes. And it's amazing. I feel this when we talk about change, going back to the first question. I mean, there are, I've dabbled in back over the years in various environmental work and for helping to protect areas of the earth that were, virgin and untouched and were going to be developed and whatever. But anyway, so there can be practical things we do to bring about change. But I think on a really large scale, we forget that the large scale of change can be created one person literally at a time.
Yeah.
What you are doing is so vital. I mean, even if you were to stop your podcast, I would want to see you. I mean, unless, you needed to go off and retreat and do your own journey somewhere, then I would totally be supportive of that. But in terms of your work, it's not even your work, it's who you are, Orrin. I would hate to see this not be out in the world. You are, oh my gosh, you're beyond what are those megaphones? I mean, you're like, I mean, my word. And it's what you're saying is so, so, so powerful. I mean, I've got to connect you with all the people on my Facebook page. They are going to just flip out over you.
It's hard for me to hear a lot of that. I mean, I'm so ordinary and nobody really. And I don't mean that in a derogatory sense. I mean, I was actually today driving around with my son. We had to go take care of some errands this morning, and I had the thought, I was like, to be nobody's kind of a beautiful thing. It's kind of a beautiful thing because when you're nobody, you can be with everybody. I mean, everybody's nobody. And but it's the illusion is when we think we're somebody really special or really important, and that we should get special treatment, and be given a special seat at the table, and we're all just outside of the trappings. I mean, we're all just kind of nobody, and nature will tell us that for sure. And that's kind of what I love about your book too. Nature reminds us that because it is indifferent. It's indifferent to what I believe. It's indifferent to the job I have. It's indifferent to my awards and my accolades and all the letters after my name and all that kind of stuff. It's indifferent to whether I'm ordained or whether I'm just a layman. It's indifferent to whether I'm a man or a woman. It just doesn't care. And so you get to be just yourself.
I know. I love that. It's just so amazing. And that's what gives you the room to just be finally.
Yeah.
Though you do have such a stunning healing force that I think when I say I know the people on my page, I have been so blessed. They are just so loving and respectful to each other. And oh my word, I can hardly believe it. It's like it's been a whole healing experience for me.
This has been a wonderful talk. I've enjoyed every minute of this conversation. We talked about things I didn't expect we would talk about. I really didn't have any major expectations. I just like to let things go where they're going to go. And they really went some wonderful places. I think that there are definitely going to be some folks who will find this podcast and get something out of it. Before we wrap up, though, I do have one last question, and it's the last question I ask every guest. And it was sort of born out of something that I noticed in my family a couple of years ago. I noticed that at the end of the day, I would say, how was your day? Which really opened the door for some negativity. It might be a bad day at school, bad day at work. And I noticed that all of us just generally, and maybe it's just my family, I don't know, but I did notice this with other people as well, that generally, if we were telling the truth, we would linger on the negative more than the positive. So I would change just one word. I said, from now on, I'm just going to ask, did anything good happen today, to maybe generate a little more thought on our blessings instead of the bad things. So that's the question I ask. Did anything good happen today?
Oh, my word. I feel like, well, I mean, I got up. I'm alive. Oh, my word. I walked barefoot, for a couple miles. And then I had this amazing, it's like I've met, how do I say this? I've met another self. And not that you're not your own, you're own. But I have met absolutely one of the most amazing human beings that I have ever met on this planet. And I can say that with absolute 100% honesty and sincerity. When I say this is not something I'll forget, I will never forever forget this talk. I mean, never.
That is a very humbling thing to hear. I get as much out of these conversations as anybody that I've talked to, and I have always felt that perhaps I even get a little bit more, in the sense that, I get to have it, and then I get to go back and listen to it again, and then I get to reflect on it before I share it, So there's a lot of time I get to spend outside of the conversation. And then over the course of sharing these talks, I get to interact with the listeners to some degree. So there's like all these layers of reward that come out of doing that. But I've never, it's just really, I don't know, I'm kind of speechless to hear that, I really am. It's touching, and I'm very grateful for your time, honestly, and your sincerity, and for you, and not just for this conversation, but for you, sharing all in the rawness so far. I haven't finished the book, but I can tell that it's authentic and raw, and it's not trying to be something that it's not.
Oh, wow. That's beautiful. That's so beautiful. I'll let you go, but I want to say this. You create a space, Orrin, and I mean this. And everything I've said to you, I could hardly get on here soon enough with you to tell you what I see, what I feel in you. It was like I was so excited, and we hadn't even talked yet. And I saw that in you. Oh, man, this guy, he's got to be told. This is, the things that he's saying, that he said, you don't just put that out and just like, oh, that's nice. This is like, oh, my word. And then I feel like I got more out of this. Like you've given me a gift. This is like 1,000 Christmases or something. And I want to say, do you see? And then I have to say to myself, do I see? And remember to try and see myself.
Yeah.
Allow myself that sometimes.
Yeah. Now, that's a hard thing. I think that there is there's something I wrote in my journal many years ago. I was soaking in a hot bath one night, where sometimes that's where things just come, Yeah. And I kept coming in these hot baths. I was thinking about the people I admire, the historical people and philosophers and religious figures and whatever they may be, just the varied people. And I thought, my masters are low and pitiful. My masters are weak. my masters know the way through the narrow gate. And it just kept sort of coming around again and again. And so I wrote it down. And I think to some people, they hear that my masters are low and pitiful. My masters are weak. My masters are foolish. My masters know the way through the narrow gate. And they're like, well, that doesn't sound like anybody I'd want to follow. And I think perhaps that's maybe why I think humility is such a important thing. I find that it's just those beings that I tend to be attracted to are like that. They take the lowest place. They stand at the back of the line. They'll still lead, they still teach, but they're always low, and they always they give first, and they don't look for rewards or photo ops. And I guess that's for me a big important thing. I've never, and I guess it maybe aligns with who perhaps it's just shyness. So it's hard for me to always take a compliment. I guess is where I'm getting at with that. It's not in my nature. I don't do well with it because I find I get scared of that kind of thing.
Oh, that's all right, because I can feel in you that it still goes in. You're so open, and you're beyond sincere. You're living your truth in just simple moment to simple moment. Wow, and that creates such a space. You are a hand that, the hand you hold out to hold is just wide open, no judgment. It's real, it's honest, it's humble. And just the things you share, like about regrets and that. It's wow. There's so much space. People can fall into it. People that are ready to fall into, let go and fall in. They fall in to that kind of space. It's like you were saying, nature.
Yeah.
It's just there. It just is. No judgment.
So, Robin, speaking of falling in, if people want to kind of get all in with what you have going on, what is the best way for them to do that? Do you have a website that you like for people to go to?
Yeah.
Or?
Yeah, my website is just robineaston.com.
Okay. So your name, that's easy enough.
Yeah. And then my Facebook page. And right now that's I'm not on a lot of social media. But Facebook I am right now. I'm on Twitter. I don't use it as much, but probably find me on Facebook or my website.
Yeah, that's where I found you, Facebook. And then in fact, I'm actually going to go check out your website because you can get the book there too, right?
Yes. There's on the menu bar, I think it says Robin's book, and then there's another page that says Naked in Eden Reviews, I think that's the title of the page. And those two pages are about the book. And you can link from the Robin's book page, you can go directly to Amazon and get the Kindle and the paperback now, because my publishers had put it out in hardcover, and it was not affordable, and they had the Kindle way up there. So I made the book, more affordable.
Yeah, that's great. My copy is digital. I bought it through Apple Books, so I've been reading it on my iPad. But yeah, it's a good read. It's what I love. I like to read books about philosophy and religion and spirituality, things like that. From all different, I guess, veins. But I find with this book, it's been a good break because it is that, but it's a story. And it's been a while for me since I've read a good story. And right out the gate, I was like, oh, she's putting the textures in here, and that was drawing me in. I was in your space, you know what I mean? As I'm reading it, which I thought that's always good for me with a book. I'm like, oh, I'm in it now. I can feel it. I can smell it and taste it. And it's got that quality to it for sure. So
that's wonderful.
I'm more thankful every moment that I found.
Thanks for listening to my Beacon Series conversation with Robin Easton. If you'd like to experience Robin's book, Naked in Eden, make sure to visit the links in the show notes. If you found something of use in this conversation, consider visiting findthegood.news/donate, where you can help this mission and organizations working to help the victims of Hurricane Laura. I thank you for pressing play and for syncing up with this good news beacon.